母さん。
何？私もう店戻らなきゃ。
ありがと
う。もう年かしら。
My friends, Fragrant Flower Blooms, episode number 9. This stupid episode made me cry at the end with Rintaro's mom. One of the things that I've said over and over is Rintaro's mom is definitely the silent hero of the show. Like, she is incredible. Like, she is able to read Rintaro like nobody else. And, you know, for the most part, you know, if you have kids, like, you're pretty much able to kind of read them and stuff. But, like, the way that she kind of sees, like, okay, he's having feelings for the first time, or she's disappointed in him, it just kind of reminds me of my relationship with my kids. And it just hits a little different when you are able to put yourself in a character's shoes like that. And, you know, at the end, when Rintaro is, you know, he's talking through his emotional journey in middle school of, you know, why he decided to make his hair blonde and get piercings and whatever else. And his mom's listening during the whole time, but he kind of talks about, you know, how he saw some guy and he looked so happy and he just wanted a piece of that in life, right? And that's already heavy and emotional. And I want to pause there too. And, you know, and anytime I say, when I'm talking about anime, I'm reviewing anime, when I say like an anime really pulls out a strong emotion in you, whether it's, you know, sadness or hate or empathy, or when it pulls a genuine, real emotion out of you, the writer and the show, the source material, it's doing something really special. Now, unpause. So, you know, he's talking about all that, and, you know, again, his mom's listening. And during that same time, his mom's kind of having a flashback too of that time where, you know, she saw her son cry. And if any of you guys have kids out there, or, you know, maybe if you're younger and you've, you know, gotten emotional and your parents have been nearby or whatever the case is, like, it's something that, like, seeing your kids like that, it's incredibly heartbreaking. It's the only way I can really describe it. And she wanted to go out of her way, you know, to make sure that he kind of felt, you know, whatever, right? Like, I've painted my, like, nails and stuff, you know what I mean? Because, like, my daughter wanted to do X, Y, or Z. Or my son wanted a certain haircut, so I got the same one. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like you do things like that as a parent. But I love how she went out of her way. She pierced her ears for the first time. You know, she made her hair blonde as well to kind of match Rintaro, because she could tell that, like, he wanted to really do this, but his hesitation, or at least he thought he was going to ask for something and get backlash, because, you know, his parents run a pastry shop, and when you have a certain look, you know, your customers, your clientele might look at you a little different. So she wanted to make sure that like, he needs to, if this is going to make him happy, she wants to do that for him. And it was just so emotional, so sweet. And then where I got the tears, man, was just, you know, he runs out of his way and he tells his mom, thank you. And wow, like, it's making me teary eyed again just thinking about it. Like, it's just such a strong, it's just a strong emotional point. And I was like, even after, I was like, man, I was like, God damn. And I was like, man, I just watched something really special. So, you know, really, this episode to me was a 10 out of 10. Like, this was just a masterful, this was like, it was just a masterful episode. It really just, like, it took me somewhere, you know, it took me on the journey, it took me somewhere, and it just really drove that emotion home. And I can't neglect to talk about the rest of it too, where, you know, Rintaro's been, he hasn't really had friends over, you know, he's been judged in the past because of his look and the vibe that he gives off. And, you know, he's been judged before. You know, kids are assholes, you know what I mean? So kids have said some comments of like, oh, your family runs a bakery. It's like, oh, you, Mr. Thuggish Rugged, you know what I mean? Like, so he's had some trauma with that. And he took a leap because he was like, you know, this group of friends that I've made aren't like these kids. They aren't like, so they're different. You know, he's like, I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to open up. And he does. And, you know, they bless him with a great time, and they don't judge him like, oh, it's so cool. You run a bakery, right? It's like, and honestly, it is cool. Like, your family runs like a cake shop, or to have a restaurant, or I remember when I was younger, like some of my friends had had restaurants or nail shops. I remember like one of my friends hooked me up with a job during the summer. I worked at a nail shop, signing people in and stuff. It's like, it's dope. You know what I mean? So I just thought that was really cool. He took a leap there, and then the girls show up too, and he's waking up to his feelings for her, and it was just really cool. You know what I mean? Subaru being there, she gets thanked by his mom, like, hey, thank you for being friends with Rintaro, and like that's a cool moment. You know what I mean? So it was just a really heartfelt, really strong episode, and I loved it. So like I said, I said earlier, but 10 out of 10. This episode really legitimately it blew me away. And I think they really nailed, growth of a character and emotionality and, first love and a mother's embrace and a son's maturity. Like they nail like all those things that you could think of. They really nailed in this episode. So maybe you don't feel the same way. Totally cool. You know what I mean? This was a slower episode. It was very intentional, but it was slower. Maybe you don't feel the same way. Maybe you're in the opposite. Maybe you're like, this episode sucked. It was a little bit boring. Maybe it didn't, whatever. If those are your feelings or whatever the case is, or maybe it just didn't hit for you, let me know why in the comments below. Opposite, if it did and you're on the same kind of page as me, or like you're like around the same, like, oh, it's good. You know what I mean? Let me know in the comments below. I definitely appreciate all the thoughts. But yeah, another great episode of Fragrant Flower Blooms. It continues to be one of the best new shows of the year for sure. I don't think it's like this, romance anime renaissance of like this, like, oh, this is how you do it. But it is a really good show. I would put this on the same level of another show that I loved. People are making this like the way people talk about this show specifically, or the manga or whatever, or the light novel, is they make it sound like it's on the level of like some of the best romance anime ever. I don't think it's quite there, but I would put it at a level of like A Sign of Affection. And if you never watched that show, definitely go watch it. It's very special too. It's very unique. But I would put this on the same level of A Sign of Affection. And that's not a diss on this at all. That Sign of Affection is great. I would say this is also great. It's just maybe it's not up to the par of like, this season, Rascal Bunny's here, My Dress Up Darling's here. Other anime that I would put up there like Horimiya. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't put it quite up there with like the GOATs, but I think it's a great show. All right, I've ranted on enough. You guys have a great rest of your day, your week, your month, your year. Hit like before you guys leave, and I'll see you next week for episode 10. Peace out, my friends.